11, I think it's 2861. There are two projects that are in the, so the 2609 is the Vietnam Vets widening project on the east part of Vietnam Vets, and the 2861, excuse me, the 2861 is the Vietnam Vets widening project in the long range plan, and the 2609 is Hoffman Drive. So it's actually the Vietnam Vets number. It's not 2611. I think it's 2861. So, and the other part of it that you had mentioned, the Hoffman Drive, is also in that plan, in the long range plan.
I'll double check that.
Okay. And also believe that I want to mention that at least the two of the local governments have already kicked in some money already on this project with DDOT.
I guess my only comment is the fiscal years we're showing all is 23. I guess kind of going through from what we've talked about some with our, not to beat on this particular project, but just kind of an idea that we've, things we've talked about with our project delivery task force is realistic years.
Mm-hmm.
It may just be just to have it in here in this tip and then carry it forward, and then the next tip will be more realistic.
Yeah, I
There may
think
be
there's,
some method to it.
yeah, the reason that these are all listed in 23 is that they all involve state and local funds at this time rather than any federal funds. Even the NHPP listed at this time is advanced construction, so what's being programmed is all state funds as well.
Okay.
So if we need to refine that when federal funds really do come into play, we'll do that.
Any other comments, questions? Okay. I think that being an informational item for our agenda, thank you, Anna. I don't have anything else on that one. Moving on to item 4B, that's a presentation of the 2045 RTP amendment. Amendments. On that, passing it back to Anna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a proposal to amend the Cleveland Street Extension project into the Regional Transportation Plan. The project description given here on the summary page is the same as what you saw on the tip page we just reviewed together. Same total estimated project cost as well. We're going to be taking this proposed amendment to the Transportation Policy Board later this month and ask them to consider adopting it into the long-range plan. There is one small, or a couple of small corrections here in the same vein as the corrections we saw on the tip page. This is going to be a project that's managed by TDOT, though we have it listed as Metro Nashville right now. And the funding involved does not involve federal funds at this time, though federal funds are listed here on this summary page. That will be corrected before the Transportation Policy Board meeting. If anyone has any questions, definitely happy to take those as well.
Well, I have a question about that as well. This project will include not just the bridges over the interstate, but other multimodal improvements all the way from Cowan Street, all pretty much through the neighborhood, all the way maybe up to Dickerson, not just Dickerson Pike, but maybe east of there. How extensive is that?
Anyone with familiarity on the details able to speak toward the project?
I just, how extensive are the $46 million, particularly mostly in state funds? It won't just be, I guess, connecting over the interstate, building a bridge over the interstate and buying that right of way, but will it include any multimodal improvements primarily east of the interstate, east of Dickerson Pike, to push it into the neighborhood along Cleveland Street, for example? Hadn't been determined.
No, that would be
I think that's the
Dickerson.
terminus, is that Dickerson?
investments being made in that neighborhood.
Okay.
But Oracle and other developers that are better connected, even across the national, they're improving the pedestrian bridge over Ellens Parkway as well. That would be a link from Nashville all the way to the river.
Okay. So So but that's not included, that's a separate project, that's not, okay. Gotcha.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Just to add to what Marcy said there, I believe the project scope currently includes the intersections of Grace Street and Dickinson Pike and Cleveland Street and Dickinson Pike. They're within the scope of this $46 million. So those are indeed to the east of the interstate, but no, I don't think the project extends much east of Dickinson Pike presently. If that helps you.
No, I was looking at details about where that alignment would be.
Some of that money will include necessary right-of-way. Those two intersections I've just listed, not being an urban area, that right-of-way is pretty expensive. Some of that money it is to the east of the interstate, but not to the east of Dixon, other than the location of those intersections. Am I right there, Mark?
Sounds realistic. Okay. All right. Seeing no more, I think that concludes this item on our agenda. Next, we'll go to item 4C. That's a presentation of the draft 23 to 26 tip. And for that, I believe Sean and Anna.
Thank you, Chair. So one more tip item for you today. This tip is focused on our transportation improvement program. That'll identify how we're going to spend federal funds for the next 4 years, so fiscal years 2023 through 2026. We started this process about a year ago, so thank you all for participating with us through this whole year of compiling your project funding requests and updating that information, identifying additional funding requests that you had on those projects, and then going through the process of identifying and prioritizing which projects we'll be able to fund over the next 4 years. Currently, we are in our review process, and so we have gotten comments back from the state, from DOT, that we are finishing off addressing. The document's also currently under review by FHWA and FTA. And we also have the document out for public review and comment. And so we'll be collecting those comments and addressing any significant changes before adoption of the TIP scheduled for later this month on November 16th by the board. And then the document then gets submitted back to TDOT and onto the feds for their final approval of everybody's TIP as part of the state transportation improvement program. So that I think is scheduled for maybe in January for the final, and so that document will then become our operating document of the TIP that we're working off of. And so a lot of the changes that Anna has discussed today will also need to be folded in as we kind of reconcile these documents moving forward. But just a couple of highlights. We've got not only the document available for review that contains some of the basic introduction, background information on the transportation improvement program, the development process, how it relates to other planning documents that we work on, how you all are involved in the process. It also contains the financial plan, so to demonstrate the revenue that we'll have over the next 4 years, as well as the programming over those federal fiscal years to ensure that we are fiscally constrained, not programming more money than we have available. And then also the document gets fairly long when we add in the project pages to the TIP document, which probably is 3/4 of the document itself. So please review that and look at particularly at some of your projects that are kind of on that cusp of they've either been advertised for construction and they're looking to move on and not carry forward into the next TIP, or they may be moving into construction in the very near term and you want to make sure that that project is carrying over. I think those projects in particular we'll keep a close eye on to make sure that we don't slow up your project and allow it to move forward. If you go to the next slide, we I think the easier way to search for your project page and examine the funding details on your project is to use the TIP interactive database, which is available at that link, gnrc.org/TIP/2020 or 2326. This is the latest version of the interactive database that you all should have accounts with now, and hopefully have your queue set up so that you can see all the projects that you are the proponent for, or projects that are in your city or county. This is an easy way to drill down to see particular projects and the funding information associated with those. You can either search by your community, your project name, your project ID, the TDOT PIN number, and that is a little bit easier to navigate than the document. And this also, as we move forward and things change very quickly with the TIP, this is going to be the best resource moving forward, because it's going to be incorporating the amendments that we discuss here. And as those details change, this will stay in real time. So just a couple of key takeaways on this TIP document. I know that we've talked a lot and spent a lot of time this cycle in really getting the funding information, schedule, status details down. But I would say that this TIP primarily focuses on existing commitments. So a lot of the projects that were in the 2020 to 2023 TIP are carrying forward into this TIP. Some of those projects have been slower to move through the development process and therefore are carrying forward into this TIP. But there's also a number of projects that we, in the discussions with communities, that we identified as either not priorities or not projects that you realistically thought you could accomplish in the next 4 years. And so there's a number of projects that have kind of fallen out of this TIP. And it also sets aside, I know we've been talking about a lot of the inflationary pressures that we're facing, and as projects have gone to construction and those bids have come back, there's been alarm across project proponents, MPO staff, state agencies on the numbers coming back from those bids often are higher than the programmed amount of funds. And so we've been trying to kind of search for additional funding sources to make sure that that project can move forward. And so one thing that we did with this TIP cycle is that we set aside reserve funds, 25% for the first year, projects programmed in the first year, 35% for the second year, and 45% of that construction cost in the third year, fourth year, to really set those projects up for greater success as they went out to bid, that, if the bids came back higher, that they'd still be able to move forward with that project. Another thing is that we've also set aside a significant portion of funds for some of our programs, such as the Active Transportation Program, the Transit and Technology Program, and we will have future calls for projects for those. Obviously, there's also the calls for projects on the state side through the CMAQ program, the TAP program, and others. I think the last thing to mention is just, there is a significant portion of investments in here, about $1.6 billion. However, there's a lot of priorities within this document that are still going to need additional funding in order to bring that project to fruition. And so a lot of the state-led projects identified through the IMPROVE Act in particular, where sizable amount of investment on some of those projects. So approximately another billion, 1.1 billion is going to be needed beyond the life of this TIP to fully carry those projects through to completion. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention the schedule. Obviously, we're out for public review and comment, looking to gather those comments for the meeting on the 16th. We feel like the document is largely finalized. However, as you know, as we develop this document, we go through obligations that occur on a weekly basis, and so there will be some reconciling, once this document goes into action, of the obligations that have occurred through this first quarter of the fiscal year, and kind of reconciling those to make sure that we've got the latest snapshot of, you know, the funding assigned to particular projects. And I will add that, you know, majority of the comments that we've received so far in working with TDOT have been tied to those obligation of funds on particular projects. And so I think, you know, if anything, moving forward, as projects move through to NEPA or to design or right-of-way or construction, you'll see some of those funding lines start to fall off of the project pages. So I think with that, feel free to review or email us comments, and got the draft document in the TIP database, and feel free to share it with your local stakeholders as well.
I would say overall, you guys did a great job. I mean, I think looking back where things were 5 years ago, to where they are today, as far as the tools that we all have at our disposal to get projects to you guys, you know, the ability to have comments like we do, when we have updates to projects and that kind of stuff, just all the tools you guys have come up with in the last few years. Really fantastic. We really appreciate that. But I do want to say, I think this is probably about the most important thing that this body will vote on, probably on every few years. And to kind of go back to my previous question, we're not voting on it. We're just seeing it as going on with the policy board. Now, y'all know he's working TDOT. And I don't think there's another MPO in the state. I might be wrong. I'm not sure, but I don't think there's another MPO that TCC doesn't vote on this item before it goes to the executive committee or whatever they normally call it. So I'd like to, going forward, I'd like for it, if it's possible, to bring back the endorsements that we used to do. This is something that probably should have a vote, even if it's kind of a rubber stamp kind of thing. I understand that, but I think for the national community, it would be unique in that regard to not have any kind of vote on any of these big items that are coming up. I think that's very unusual.
And that's something, if you're okay, we can take action on this, and endorse it to the TPB. I think that's,
Yeah, I think, not up on my Robert's Rules of Order here, so somebody could probably, correct me on this, but I think if we had a motion to, have this be, as a I don't know, vote as a recommendation item?
I'm going to motion to add that to the agenda or whatever we might need to do there to amend the agenda to allow that, whatever action we need to have.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I believe this is to, instead of making this an informational item, this is a voting item to be recommended to the, policy board.
Mr. Chairman, I think that motion.
All right.
I think it's a great document. I think you guys, like I said, done a phenomenal job all the way through the process. But I do think the TCC should have a more direct role in all of that stuff before it goes to the elected officials to be voted on and approved.
Okay.
Now, I want a clarification. Let me second that, and then I'll have for discussion. That includes the cycle amendments that we just discussed?
I believe that's just gonna be for this item.
Just this.
Okay. We won't include this other.
We would have to go back and
Okay.
amend that.
Right, okay.
But just to be clear, this is merely clarifying, correct?
I think ultimately it'll fall to the, rules, set forth within the governing documents of the MPO GNRC. So ultimately it falls underneath that.
I think what you're getting at would need a motion to require that cycle amendments and, TIP, long-range TIP approvals or TIP amendments like this, or TIP cycle amendments, would need action by the TCC board going forward. This is not an advertised action item on the agenda. It's advertised
Correct.
information only.
Mhm.
So best we can do is just sort of ceremonial for today for this one issue, but going forward, I think what perhaps Bill is getting at, and perhaps you're getting at, is you think the TCC ought to vote on them now, not be merely information. Correct?
timing issues with that, I don't know, maybe we need to look at that, but I think that does a disservice for them to have it just kind of come to them and tell them they have 3 minutes to figure out how to discuss the item.
Would it be more appropriate to, put on the next agenda that we are going to, vote on having the voting items in the future?
Is that going to be a change to the governing documents of how, what we're permitted or allowed to do? If that's the case, I guess that would have to come back as a separate item, I'm thinking.
Might require a change to the bylaw.
Yeah, the bylaw,
Yeah,
it'd be
we'd
a
have to-
bylaw change.
Double check, but I think that what you guys are getting at is like, we want, the TCC to be endorsing the documents that we're then asking the Transportation Policy Board to be adopting. And so, if the endorsement is the easiest way to convey that message, then that seems most appropriate.
I mean, back there, come the time when it was difficult to get a quorum together and everything, I kind of get it, but we're all here right now. So
Yeah.
I think there's no reason we can't be voting on these items, is my take.
Okay.
In the future, if that requires a bylaw amendment or whatever it is.
You may want to check with whoever your legal counsel is, but I think the fact that we've always just endorsed them is different than actually, we're a committee. Keep in mind that we're a committee, we're not a commission or anything like that.
That's true.
So we've always just endorsed those items. So ultimately, the only body that can actually take action is the actual policy board. So that was something that would take a bylaw check. We've only endorsed the items in the past. So ultimately, the policy board can take whatever action they choose to, regardless of.
There was a vote taken to endorse.
Yes, yes, we
There
have
was.
taken a
That's
vote.
what I'm talking about.
Yes.
I'm not talking about
Yeah.
us going and
Yeah.
digging in the ground to build projects or anything. I
Yeah.
just mean, I think if a policy document is coming through, that needs to be voted on this body.
Well, and I guess conversely to that, we think about from a vote standpoint, positive or negative. If we were to vote negatively on something, I don't think that would kill an item per se. It just goes to the policy board as a negative recommendation.
This may raise some eyebrows at their point. They
Correct.
may want to read the minutes closer to see
Right.
why we voted
Same as
negatively.
our planning commissions going to our elected bodies for negative. or
There's a little bit
positive
different there because in state law, planning commission actually has some authority to do
Yes,
certain
they
things that
do.
boards can't do.
Yeah.
Or commissions can't do,
Correct.
and vice versa.
Well, given that, would this body probably need to meet in a work session type, to go through each of these PIP projects one by one?
I think we can have a private study session.
I'm not looking to go that in.
I mean,
No.
there are a lot of projects on there, but, I look at them, I look at each one of them, and some of them I wouldn't vote for individually, I'll tell you that much. But, I have an unrelated question. Is this the last full TIP? Oh,
Let's stick to
sorry.
the motion on the floor. I think we've got the recommendation. This would just be a vote for a recommendation item, for the TIP. I guess to that point, any other, comments or questions on that, the motion that's on the floor?
I would just comment that, there's a difference between advising the policy commission via this kind of, vote or, recommendation on disapproval, and disempowering the, policy committee.
Mhm.
So as you say, it would need further discussion if disapproval here results in the policy commission not knowing about it, or that it was removed from an agenda or a notification.
I think it's.
Yeah.
Because that would be disempowering the next.
Correct.
No.
No.
Yeah, we don't have the authority to do that.
No,
Right.
that's right. Okay. Any other comments, questions? All
I made a motion, but I need to be reminded what exactly it is.
It's
So-
that first motion, right? I don't think we voted on the first. The first.
I think we just had the one that got the second.
You said one.
And it was to vote on the draft 23-26 TIP as a recommendation to the policy board. Yeah, to endorse it.
And we have a second.
And we have a second. Yep. Okay. I think we've covered it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to go back to that other question that's related. But, is this the last full tip that we have before the next update of the long-range plan?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
All right, that's it.
All right.
Just wanted to respond to Josh. Thank you for your comment about this development cycle. I think one other thing I wanted to reiterate is that now the hard part begins of actually moving these projects through the development process. There's a number of projects that are still kind of early on in NEPA or design and have a number of steps left in the process. And so as you go through local programs, move these projects forward, be in constant communication, not only with us and local programs staff on, you know, any cost changes, schedule changes, because the more that we can know about that earlier on, the more that we can help out in terms of trying to identify funding sources or accommodating those changes. And so I think the task force, you know, has met, 5 times over the past year, but that work is still unfinished, and there's still, you know, it's kind of an ongoing effort that needs to remain a priority for our region, so that we can spend down that high unobligated balance.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to offer a motion to consider whether or not we want to endorse or take under advisement, items related to the long-range transportation plan and TIP going forward, being added to next month's agenda.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second that these items be
That way we can discuss it
correct. Okay,
on the record. The public knows about it.
right.
Just to be clear, there's no separate TCC meeting, correct?
No, next one is January.
But the executive board is meeting.
That is correct. So we have a motion and a second. Any?
Or they make the-
November.
November,
And, but not in December?
not the Transportation Policy Board.
So January meeting.
January's meeting, okay, moving forward from January, okay. So I guess, as a matter of discussion, this is more of an item where we would be going back to our traditional methods of,
If it affects the
Action.
long-range transportation plan, we've gotten approved through FHWA and everything, we probably need to have it as an action item if we're gonna do anything.
okay.
That's my point. That's Paul's point.
So this would only apply to LRTP and, TIP.
If this is okay, I mean, I think it's an open discussion about what should be and should not be voted on. And you can look at what we've traditionally done in the past and go from there, but I think it's most appropriate to have it on an agenda item and advertise so that we can have a full discussion. So it may be more open-ended than simply the TIP and the LRT. We may want to talk about UPWP and other stuff. Yeah. So I'll accept that amendment
Okay,
in the interest of moving us forward.
gotcha. So that would cover, let me make sure I got that, so that would cover basically any, action with federal or, well, I guess federal or state funds, is that, because there could be some items that are state funded and not federal, but the state then has to act on those, TDOT does. Yeah, I mean, the state funds could be in the TIP, so, okay. Now, I guess we have a motion and a second for that. We are, we've not advertised for this either, per se. I don't know on my Robert's rules if that's actually,
Probably should have been under other business.
yeah,
Done it.
yeah, we could. Do we vote? Anybody might be more up on their Robert's Rules of Order.
I don't think you actually needed a
vote.
motion for that, you just needed to request it be on the next agenda.
Okay. So then that motion will revert to the request. Okay. If the seconder is okay with that. Okay. All right. I think we've got it covered. All right. Are we, let's see, Sean, Anna, are we good with the, draft tip? Okay. All right. We have now covered item 4C. of our agenda. Moving on to 4D, let's move on to the presentation of the safety performance measure targets. For this, pass it to Ashley Glasscock. There she is.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I'm Ashley Glasscock, and we'll be going over some of the safety performance targets as well as some trends that we have been seeing so far this year. This is just to remind you of the areas I'm going to be covering. So it's the 7 MPO counties. And when I refer to month to date, we're going to be talking about January to October of this current year. So I'm going to call out Andy on this one. Do you know how many people can fit inside of Nissan Stadium?
65,000?
69,143, so close.
All right.
Do you know how many people have been involved in a crash this year?
I'm gonna assume more.
Very good assumption. So more than the capacity that fits inside of Nissan Stadium have been involved in a crash so far this year. We are currently on pace to double that capacity. That's equivalent to 90,000 people involved. That's one person every 5 minutes. When we start talking about fatalities, we've had 217 fatalities so far this year. That's the equivalent of 4 NFL active rosters, less than about 6 per week. Go and look at serious injuries. There have been about 1,079 people seriously injured so far this year. That's every player drafted since 2019. That's since it was held here in Nashville. That's roughly 4 people seriously injured every single day. When we start looking at non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries, there have been about 164 non-motorists severely injured or killed. That's the entire personnel of the sideline of those 4 NFL teams. That's including coaching staff as well as cheerleaders. That's 1 non-motorist every other day. So just to remind you, going into the year, we had set roadway safety targets. We had set them for number of fatalities, fatality rate, number of serious injuries, serious injury rate, as well as the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. This graph is this table is just here to remind you of baseline that was set, that 1-year target we had set for this year, as well as the resulting federal highway target, and to remind you of our 2045 goal. I'll go into detail of these numbers a little bit in the next following slide. So for fatalities, on this graph in gray, we have the historic fatality numbers every year. We have the baseline that was set, 211.4, as well as the target that we selected at 191 fatalities for this year. So far, month to date, we're at 217 fatalities. And the orange line is just to remind you of that goal that we had initially set going out to 2045 to get fatalities down to 152. For seriously injured, we have the same sort of graph, reminding you of the 2022 target that we had selected of keeping serious injuries under 1,310. So far, month to date, we're at 1,079. And just reminding you of that 1,039 seriously injured goal by 2045. And then we're looking at non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. Again, you have the historic data going back to 2011, the baseline, as well as the 2022 target of 173. Currently, month to date, we're at 164 non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. And then just reminding you again of that 138 that we wanted to have by the year 2045. This is our report card, if you will. Number of fatalities, according to the baseline, we're trending upward. We had a target of 191. Month to date, we're at 217. So we've already missed our fatality target by 26 people. For fatality rate, according to the baseline, we are trending upward. We had a target set at 0.83 fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. We currently can't calculate the month to date as we don't have DMT data available at the time. For number of seriously injured, according to the baseline, we're trending downward. We had a target of 1,310. Currently, we're sitting at 1,079. Even though we're under by 231 people, if we stay on pace, we will unfortunately miss this target as well. For serious injury rate, baseline trend trending downward. We had a 5.72 serious injuries per 100 million vehicle miles traveled as our target. And similar fatality rate, we're unable to calculate month-to-date calculations due to lack of EMT information. For a number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, baseline trend is trending upward. We set a target for 173 for this year. We are currently at 164. We are only 9 under with 3 months left to go of the year, so we are likely to miss this target as well. Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about the demographics of those people that make up those crashes. Starting off, school-age children, ages 5 to 18. We have about 10,900 school-age children involved in crashes so far this year. 15 of them have been killed, 123 have been seriously injured. And I want to note that a lot of these people are innocent bystanders. They're not even old enough to drive.
There are ways to break that down by driving age.
You mean by the actual age of the
How many
driver?
of them are kids in like a school bus versus kids that are driving?
Okay.
So I'm thinking if you get maybe 15 and 18.
Yeah, we could definitely do that. We could look at 5 to 15 when they got their permit, and 15 to 18.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Then we look at elderly drivers, so ages 65 and older. About 15,329 elderly drivers are involved in a crash so far this year. 26 have been killed, 77 have been seriously injured. Now we look at young drivers, ages 18 to 24. 33,583 young drivers have been involved in a crash. 73 have died, 378 have been seriously injured. That's 1 out of 3 people involved in a crash is a young driver, and they account for 35% of our fatalities and our serious injuries. Switching gears a little bit to driving behavior. Looking at speeding, 3,552 people have been involved in a speeding-related crash. 33 have been killed, 127 have been seriously injured. Drinking and driving. A little under 3,000 people have been involved in a drinking and driving related crash. 41 have been killed, 155 have been seriously injured. And one of the worst ones yet, not wearing a seatbelt. 988 people have been involved in, or unbelted in a crash. That's less than 1% of the crashes that have occurred so far this year in our region. But yet 87 have been killed, 229 have been seriously injured. They account for nearly a little less than 50% of our fatalities and 1 out of 5 of our serious injuries. And then when we go into looking at location-based information. Here we have the geographic distribution of crashes occurring between 2017 and 2021. You can see the red areas where more crashes have occurred, green is where less crashes have occurred. Most of the crashes seem to be occurring in city centers and along interstates and principal arterials. And then when we look at severe crashes by type of roadway, you can see that about 37% are occurring on our local roads, with the rest of them occurring on interstates and state routes. And normally the narrative is that interstates are more dangerous, but unfortunately it seems to be more of our state routes. And then I will pass it off to Daniel to how to counter these trends.
So that presentation is likely pretty shocking for all of you. I think the trends that Ashley presented on say that safety planning is pretty complex. And I think that countering this trend is going to involve going at it with a different approach. There are proven approaches. So FHWA promotes a safe systems approach, which emphasizes that speed is a critical component in contributing to crashes, but that safety planning is a complex and shared responsibility. I don't know if you're familiar with the E's of safety planning, but there's engineering, evaluation, education, enforcement, and equity. It takes a diverse group of stakeholders to actually figure out how to improve safety on our roadways. It's not just an engineering approach. It's not just an enforcement approach. As Ashley mentioned, some of the causes of the crashes are enforcement-based, some are roadway design-based, but really going at it from an approach of this is going to take all of us to solve, and how can we do our part in the evaluation engineering aspect of safety planning to improve safety on our roadways and actually get at achieving these targets and reducing fatalities and serious injuries. So in terms of what we talked about today in the tip, Sean mentioned a few funding sources that can actually contribute to improving safety, but just to map out how the tip funding is broken down, In total, the TIP investments are about 1.6 billion over those 4 years. The majority of that goes towards specific projects, some specific safety projects that are currently programmed in the TIP are interchange lighting, ramp improvements, new bike and pedestrian facilities, as well as transit facilities. Those are all improving safety, but in terms of how we approach meeting these targets and improving the safety of our transportation system as a whole, there are only two programs or programmatic investments in our TIP. One is the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which is under TDOT's discretion. It's only about 12 million, and typically TDOT invests in projects such as ramp improvements, rail crossing improvements, bike and pedestrian spot safety improvements from the multimodal office with the Pedestrian Road Safety Initiative, as well as restriping and signage through the RSA program, the road safety audits. And then the other program that we have set aside that is more safety focused is the Active Transportation Program. That's about 41.3 million. And as we move into the call for projects in the spring with that program, we have the possibility of saying that every project funded through that program should have a primary safety component. So there are things that we can do from an engineering and evaluation perspective that improve safety, but as I said earlier, the enforcement, education, complex, comprehensive approach is really what has been proven to improve safety from a system-wide basis. But then, again, from the specific projects that are already programmed in the TIP, many of those projects have not gone through design and are currently in NEPA or haven't been started. There's still an opportunity to incorporate safety components into those projects and prioritize safety, as this committee and our policy board voted to do. Safety was the #1 goal in the RTP. So there's still an opportunity to incorporate more safety components into those projects, especially in the areas where we're seeing the crashes that Ashley presented on. So this is really just to spark a conversation on how we can change our approach and better improve safety in our region so that we start to meet these targets and actually make our transportation system safer.
My only suggestion besides safety improvements through the NPO process would be, and I hesitate to say this, but I don't even like this, they had to do this, but because of all the idiots on the lake, TWRA and others now have a boat safety class you have to go through before you get your boat license if you're below a certain age. My kids would qualify for that, not the idiot part of it, but the boat license.
We're all there.
Part. But I'm curious if we should recommend through the NPO to the state legislature that perhaps there be a mandatory, I don't even like this as a parent, but a mandatory summer program that you have to go through a driver safety course at some point before you graduate, to try to get, particularly because a lot of the I mean, I know I felt bulletproof, it probably wasn't idiotic at times driving back and forth to college, and that's when my speed tended to go upwards and stuff. And I feel like a lot of college kids do that. If you look at our map of Murfreesboro and Nashville, and on the universities there, it seems to me a lot of times if you look over at the person that's causing mayhem in the traffic or going faster as traffic gets more congested. I think we went into Atlanta, now we're getting that in Nashville some. A lot of times you look over at that driver, to me, and this is anecdotal, but that driver is typically 18 to 26, 24, age group. And, you know, the way they tend to move in and out of traffic opens the door for them if they have any type of miscalculation to cause a major accident because of all the congestion around them. They're going 80 miles an hour, everybody else is trying to go 55 or 60, you know, or 100 miles an hour. That would be my only big suggestion is if we're going to have any impact on speed great degree. We can design stuff all day long. My personal opinion is we design roadways for higher speeds than what local law enforcement likes.
Mm-hmm.
And actually encourage people to speed.
I think those two policy ideas are worth having a discussion about. I think that that get on the, okay, even if you implement a state law change that requires education on better driver behavior, it still takes the other aspect of what we designed to complement that and make sure that we need safer drivers on the road, but we need to correct maybe some of our engineering
The
decisions.
last real opportunity you have is, unfortunately, it's high school. Because
Right.
After somebody gets out of high school, they go a myriad of different directions, military, college, working, whatever, you don't really have a mandate.
Well, to that point, two things that stood out to me, I think, and I don't know what the percentage of the young drivers at 18, I would probably even back up and say 16, to mid-20s. I mean, there's a reason why insurance is higher for that age bracket, especially males. And that's traditional, I'm gonna say, probably because of that. But then the other aspect of it to me is the, proportion without seatbelts. I mean, I've grown up with a seatbelt, maybe our parents' generation, maybe probably didn't, but we're now in a place, I'd be curious about maybe cross-sectional analysis between the young drivers who are not wearing seatbelts, if they're too cool for it. I would be curious about that. Those are probably get to a level of, as you pointed out, Tom, law changes and enforcement. That's probably not necessarily within the purview of this, of what we do. I think the other thing that I would be curious about, I would say probably the greatest number of crashes probably related to congestion, but I'd be curious about the serious crashes, whether it be fatalities or injuries, where those occur. And where I'm getting to is I would almost imagine a lot of these may be at intersections that even if it's signalized, it's safe. But it could be an intersection, it could be signalized, it may need a signal. I know that TDOT has gone through the process, we've had them before, of having a signal installed for a particular safety problem. But as anybody knows, a signal is not going to solve safety. It can help in some aspects, but it can also increase rear-end collisions. So I'd be curious, I think, about that. And where I'm getting to, I think, is getting more to the ITS level of funding, that there is a smooth, efficient flow of traffic, and maybe some of these more heavily congested. I think that's probably points to the state route problem that we have. Is your heavy congestion. I'd take Gallatin Pike would probably be a great example of a heavily congested. You've got a lot of signals, you've got a lot of things going on there. I know we have our own problems in Mount Juliet, but you could point to any one of these numbers in our own communities that I would say is there maybe some opportunity for some short-term type funding, intersection analysis. I don't know if this is something that we want to take on at the GNRC level or not, but doing just a spot safety type analysis at intersections, at signalized intersections, or just taking, let's find our top 20 most dangerous intersections and seeing what are some maybe short-term, near-term type improvements that we can do. I think even at the GNRC level, and we can compare it across, and we could all say, well, I've got number 14, well, I got number 1, and maybe some recommendations that might come out of it. And I'm not saying that we spend federal money to fix all this. It could be something of an offset of a left turn. If you've got a double left and you've got another single left turn, maybe they can't see, maybe you need to switch that over. And it's just a restriping. It could be something that simple. It could be the way the intersection's offset. It could be signal timing. It could be some simple things like that. But I think that's one thing that I think I would like to maybe see us pursue. As you think about what can we do in the short term? We're doing this safety analysis year to year to year. What can we do between now and when we're talking about this next year to actually have something tangible that we can control? And I think that's one of the things that we could do. I would think, go through its analysis of the safety, and there's probably a little bit of an engineering aspect to it that we need to look at and see. There's probably a signal aspect to it as well. There may be more than that. That's what I'm kind of thinking of in my mind. So, I'm not limiting it to just that, but I think those are some things that we could and say, what's our worst ones we have in our own communities? We might not have something in the top 20 or anything like that, but what's our biggest problem? If we can say.
Some of you may be aware that TDOT is preparing to release, they're doing training sessions, I believe, this week and next week. And if you've been, I believe it's their current e-trim users, they're actually partnering with, it's Numeric, I believe, is the name of the company who does AASHTO safety wear. They're actually gonna release it and have locals and other governments be able to have access to the safety data through that numeric system and AASHTO safety wear. It's actually a pretty slick system. We've gotten another email chain for that. Actually, there's a training session, I believe, tomorrow. I believe it's one of the training sessions.
And the week after.
Next Tuesday, I believe. I think it's a Tuesday and a Thursday. But, if you go to Numeric's website and look up, or just look up AASHTO safety wear, that's an opportunity there that's, kind of hits at what you're talking about looking at certain corridors, certain counties. A lot of the metrics that the GNRC's data team have put together and pulled from Titan over the time for us, and some of the things we've talked about having a common central source of data just to pull that information from, so that we're working off the same data. I think TDOT's actually been working in the background to do that for us, to pull that data. The one thing I'll say from the data they're gonna be able to pull is someone who uses that data and has, well, I don't have direct access, but one of my folks has access to the actual reports in Titan, because there's so much personal information in there. One of the things that's very beneficial from police reports and crash reports is the actual officer's, narrative, that they tell what they responded to, what the accident or the crash data, I would say accident, crash data, what they responded to, what each vehicle told them, which the occupants told them. It's nice to have that to actually piece together what happened, because a lot of times the diagrams are trash, and sometimes the information given just doesn't give you enough information to actually diagnose what happened. But the narrative can really help you detail what happened, especially when it comes months afterwards. But the information that Numeric has put together, the program Numeric has put together with AASHTO safety wear, and that data from Titan being in there, I think once that's rolled out, people start to use, that's going to be a tool that I think a lot of us are going to use long term. It spits out some really nice reports to kind of hit it exactly what you're talking about. You start talking about top corridors, putting together heat maps. That kind of stuff's kind of pretty built into the system. You just go through and tell it the criteria you're looking for, what you're looking for, with regard to types of crashes. It spits that information out. Really slick stuff. So I would encourage you to reach out to TDOT. I can't remember which office is doing it. I want to say it's long range planning is the top office doing that, but
I feel like the email came from IT.
yeah, I believe it did,
I
but.
don't recall who it was.
And I can find that out and send it to GNRC
Okay.
and let them
Yeah,
disseminate that
that'd be
information.
good.
I'll be glad to do that.
Yeah.
Back on the educational section for a minute, there would have to be funding associated with that if the state were to mandate something like that.
Mhm.
And that may be something that we would have, an active role in terms of establishing some portion of our outreach money for helping fund those who maybe couldn't afford to go to the class otherwise. Like, oh, my kids went to a private one, which I think before helped on the insurance, but.
Yeah, I think with the active transportation program, we've funded a couple of outreach and education efforts in the past. So it's within that realm of possibility. I would just note too, just to kind of zoom out a little bit, look, Daniel, Anna, and I were at the annual conference for the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations last week in Minneapolis, and there was a number of sessions on safety. And I remember one of the sessions, they had everybody raise their hand on who's seen increases in fatalities within their region, and everybody's hand went up in the room, and then they said, all right, now who's seen decreases, and like 2 hands went up. And so this is really a nationwide epidemic at this point, and so a lot of other regions are struggling with this, and we've been looking at some peers to try and get some examples or pilots to kind of mimic it in our region. But I think from the federal level that there's been a huge push on this safe systems approach, funding tied to it, and so I think that there are a lot of opportunities to plug into with this to counter the trend. And I like all of the ideas that are being circulated. I think one thing that stood out when we were kind of piecing this together is that the tip of investments towards safety are, I think, they're never enough. Nobody ever has enough money towards safety investments. But I think one thing that stood out is that there are a lot of problem, like kind of the high crash intersections that we see throughout the region that are showing up on those maps with the red dots. Those are not cheap projects, and I would say that the projects that we have, we don't have a lot of major intersection improvement projects of like two state routes coming together and identifying improvements at those intersections, including a number of safety countermeasures. And so the pie for transportation investments would probably need to grow in order to address some of these, or be reallocated to other projects. But I think that's one of the challenges, is that if you truly want to address a particular unsafe corridor or intersection, it's probably going to come with a high price tag, and trying to figure out how we work with those areas that we want to address and provide the resources that are actually necessary to combat that, which will be a challenge on the funding side as well.
And I'll just add that, going off of what Andy and Jonathan said, I presented to you on our non-motorized risk index before, but I would encourage you to, when you're looking at what your high priority areas are, I would encourage you to go back and look at that index and see where high risk is and what sort of factors are present there, which might help you prioritize where to use funding and improve safety in those areas.
Actually, I was looking at the handout that we received here. Obviously, some of these variables that you identified, young and impaired and speeding and all that, kind of are a combination of data. I was curious about the percent of truck traffic that's been increasing, becoming a bigger stream of the traffic flow. What percent of these involve trucks, particularly on our state highways and interstate systems?
So looking at some of the truck like BMT that we have as like models from our travel demand model, we're expecting to see a 20% increase. I can't speak to what we've seen historically, like how much increase we've seen. But in terms of modes of transportation, trucks don't make up a large portion of our crashes. But the issue with a lot of commercial vehicles is that we're referring to people that have PDL licenses, not like prime cars, like people that are driving commercially without needing that PDL. We can look into that a little bit more detailed. And I do have those crash profiles available at your county level, and I can give you more information if you reach out to me. I'm happy to give you some more detailed information.
Any other comments or questions? Oh, yeah, Robert.
Thank you. Actually, this back page of this slide you've given us here, can you just tell me what the population is that's covered by this? Sorry, for example, crash severity by emphasis area, senior, young, distracted, impaired. Is that those deemed at fault or everybody involved?
It's people that are involved. So if an elderly person was involved in the crash, not necessarily they were considered the at-fault driver.
So that one was everyone involved. And then is that true of the other three, the top three as well?
That's true as well. Like you don't necessarily have it identified as the at-fault person, or the like the bicyclist was at-fault, or the truck was at-fault. It's just they are involved.
Everyone involved. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other comments, questions? Okay.
Slow down, folks.
You got more?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
I know you're talking to us or other people driving. Okay. Slow down and buckle up. Okay, thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, just one more.
Okay, yeah.
Oh,
yeah, sorry.
Question about crash profiles, but it is, so we do have some data resources available. We do have a month-to-date crash tracking dashboard where you're able to filter by county, by severity, by mode, and you're able to compare this current year's month-to-date to prior year's month-to-date, and you're also able to compare the trends over time. We do have a detailed crash dashboard which lets you look at those areas, so distracted drivers, drunk drivers, speeding drivers, lets you look at trends year to year, also time of day, day of week, lets you look at them by mode, and lets you look at them by where they are. And then the countywide profiles, like you mentioned before, we do funds. We also have these available by the county level. So feel free to reach out. We do have the same information available for your specific account. And that'll be it.
There's some similar dashboards available on the Department of Safety's website as well, which is Highway Patrol.
All right, thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Dan, as well. Next, we're gonna move on to the, item 4E, this is a presentation of local bridge funding opportunities. For this is Lisa Dunn from TDOT's Local Programs Office.
Thank you. No, thank you. I don't actually have a formal presentation, I talk quick.
Perfect.
I'm good. So, Shauna reached out to me, we had a big discussion, and he said, you might want to come and present this to the TCC and the executive board, so I'll be presenting this again, but, the department has 4 dedicated programs for off-system bridges. And what I mean by off-system is those bridges are on rural minor collectors or local roads. So anything higher than that is considered on-system, and they would not be eligible for any of these fundings that I'm going to talk about. So the 4 dedicated funding sources we have is our bridge grant program. We have the high priority bridge replacement program. We have the federal BRZ program that you guys have probably heard of that says SCBG set aside that TDOT has. And then we have the new formula, the bridge grant formula through the new infrastructure law. Now, regardless of which funding source you're going to be using or seeking after, they all have the same guidelines for selection. So they all have to be that off-system bridge on that local road or that rural minor collector. They all have to be on a selection list that the department generates annually in July. So we have a selection list 1 and a selection list 2. List 1 are very bad. The load limit is less than 10 tons, and that's the only factor that gets them on list 1. The reason that load factor is got them so they're on list 1 is, well, bus can't go across it any longer, and your EMTs and your emergency response vehicles can't get, so they're not supposed to be going across it, but we know they do. List 2 goes more into a sufficiency rating, so it's got to have a sufficiency rating of less than 80, and then it goes from there. The next category is their load factor is 10 tons or higher, okay? The only way you can do a bridge that's not on one of these 2 lists is if TDOT sent you a letter and said, we're shutting your bridge down. And they're not shutting your bridge down because you didn't put up the right load sign. We're shutting it down because of the load factor, okay? So those are your main ones. So now we'll talk about each individual program really quickly. Starting with the bridge grant program. That program gets about $9.5 million a year. And we distribute that in a, if you read the law, it's kind of weird. It says 50% is split evenly across the state. So each county gets basically $50,200. Then it says 50% is based off of need. And you're like, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, the need is based off of the bridges that are on list 1. So we put in there the length of the bridge, and then that is calculated against all the other bridges across the state that are also on list 1. And it comes up with this new formula, and it calculates how much additional money each county can get. So there are unfortunate and fortunate. I call list 1 a double-edged sword, okay? You want projects on list 1 because you get more money, but you don't want them on list 1 because they're in bad shape. So it's a twofold thing. The other thing with these bridge grant funds, they're at 98 too. So 98% of the funds can come from the bridge grant program. 2% has to come from you all, versus if it's out of your budget or if you do some sort of in-kind match on some additional work that you do on the project. Contrary to the belief that's going around by my counties, this money is not just for counties to use. The cities can use it as well. But again, we're going to use the distribution of funds based off of where you are on the list. So if Gallatin has got a first bridge on list one, and then Sumner County's got the next two. Sumner County can't say, no, Gallatin, you can't have any of those funds, those are my funds. That's not true. Okay? We have to go according to the way the list is. Now, there is a little caveat there, for one of the other programs. They have a state aid program where they're allowed to transfer 50% of those funds over to their bridge grant program. We will not allow that 50% that Sumner County has just pushed over into their bridge grant program for Gallatin to use. We internally know how much will be able to be used by Gallatin, so we would need to make sure that you reach out to your state aid coordinator and make sure that we're giving you the right numbers and your bridge is also eligible and everything before we move forward, okay? The only other caveat for the bridge grant program is the length. You have to be between 20 and 100 foot in length, or we can go up to 150 foot if the ADT is 200 or above. Okay? So that's the only caveat. That restriction is not going to be for the next three programs I talked about. The high priority bridge replacement program, they get about 18.6 million annually. Right now, we are not using that money for any project because we've got them all those funds are going to be improved that project. So we're not looking to be able to use any of these funds until about 2035, 2040. So, yeah, I know, right? So just keep in mind that there will be money eventually, more money out there for these projects, but right now we're only using those to do those projects that are in the program. Yes.
Probably just for me to take back up the food chain. One of the problems I know our county has are low bridges with regard to
Low water crossing?
well, not necessarily just low water crossing, but just bridges that have been there for a long time, and in rain events of significance occur more frequently. The water gets up open and makes a low spot road, turn around type scenario. Asphalt gets washed off the slab, and they have to come back and repave it and stuff. It'd be nice if there was some additional funding to help us, not only on the road condition, but on the elevation, re-elevating those bridges, to account for water circulating.
Yeah, so, the county road superintendent has they go through this, TSEA, CHOA, the County Highway Officials Association, and, they have a board that meets regularly. It takes all this stuff into consideration. I would highly recommend you talking to your road superintendent. They've got a list of stuff they're going to the legislators for, and part of it is for additional funding for these programs. So that would be something that you would want to take back to them and have them say, how about,
Right now, if we got our road superintendent, they're like, well, kind of money to raise that bridge.
exactly.
And,
Yeah.
that just continues to be a problem.
Yeah, so, and just keep in mind, like I said, they're averaging maybe $100,000 across the state in this bridge grant program annually, and our average bridge is $445,000. That's an average, but most of these bridges are starting to come in well in the millions. So it takes several years to get enough money, and if you don't have a project on this one, it's going to take you even longer to get money in those programs.
Lisa, I think one other thing related to that topic is, with the federal, bill, there's the PROTECT program that, hasn't been allocated to projects yet, but I think it's a significant share of money. I don't remember the exact amount that may not be able to do like individual projects, but I think what you're describing of like components like elevating bridges, it's geared towards resiliency, and so that might be an opportunity if, those off-system bridges are eligible, through that program. So, yeah, we can take a look. I know Sean Sentai is not here today, but we can look into that and touch base with him.
So the next program we have is the federal BRZ program. You all know that is the SCBG set aside. It used to be 15%, it's now 20%. It used to be an 80-20 match. It's now a 100% match because PDOT's got bridge credits that they're going to allow you to use, so you get all bases at 100%. That program gets about 12.7 annually, and there is, like I said, there's no ADT restrictions or length of the bridge or anything requirements for those, okay? We also have the BSP program, the new program that was just brought out with FHWA, that was 100%. TDOT doesn't have to kick in any bridge credit money on those. That program gets about $12 million annually, and there's no links or ADT restrictions on those. And then for those two federal bridge programs, the department, we just came up with this in the last couple of weeks, but the department's going to start doing a call for those federal funding projects. So we're going to do a call for projects in October, give you about a month to send in your letter of request. It'll probably take me a month to answer all of them, but so be patient. But basically, that letter will come back and tell you yes or no if your bridge is eligible for the federal funds. And it's going to tell you that we're going to put a TIR together internally, a Transportation Improvement Investment Report, basically to come up with a cost. And then, once we get all those costs in, we'll pull all of our information on all the bridges. We will sit down with leadership and we will determine who gets funding at that time based off of the worst bridges that are out there. And then we will let everybody know probably April, May, of who got those funds and then how they can start moving forward on those projects. The last program I have is not a dedicated funding program for bridges, it's the state aid program. These funds, the state aid funds, are only for the county road superintendents to use on the state aid system. However, they can use them for bridges, in addition to their asphalt resurfacing projects that they can do with them. And then they can also transfer up to 50% of these funds to the bridge grant program. So, basically 5 sources, 4 dedicated, 1 not.
That last program is just for the counties, cities aren't eligible for that?
The state aid roads, correct, that is just counties, that's for them to do their roads on the state aid system. Yes.
Are the bridge priority lists 1 or 2, are those available for someone to view anywhere, or they just contact someone for?
If you want to contact me, I can send those to you. We were just sending them out to the county road superintendent, and then, leadership was like, I don't understand why the county thinks these funds belong, because if they belong to the city too, and I'm like, I like if we only send the list to the county. So, so now we're in the process of redrafting our guidelines for the program, and so we've got a caveat in there now that we're not sending those out to the counties anymore, starting in 2023. We're going to send them to the region, state aid office coordinators, and then they will start contacting people on the list based off of where they are on the project.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Yes?
Lisa, the BRZ, then the BFP, with the federal funds, are those SCBG or NHPP funds?
So the BRZ is SCBG, it's the set aside, but the BFP is a specific funding source set out that was identified in the Parks and Infrastructure Law. And so I believe TDOT has those labeled as HIP funds. I don't know what HIP stands for. They throw out the word HIP all the time. I'm like, okay, whatever. But those are 100%. Both programs are 100%. Now, I do want to go a little bit backwards on the BRZ program. If you've already got a BRZ project that's under development, no matter what phase you're in, we're not going to go back and change your contract and give you 100% funding. It's going to move forward as it is at age 20. Okay?
Thank you, Lisa. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, appreciate it. Very good. Okay, we're done with our informational item portion of our agenda. Now we'll move on to the regular reports. Sean's not here. Do we have anybody from Federal Highway?
I'm going to be Sean from Federal Highway.
Sean, you're Sean.
Sean Sentai, I just wanted to relay a couple of things. One, as you know, that they've been trying to hire for their community planner positions, and he feels confident that they're nearing the completion of the hiring process for 2 new community planners within his office. And hopefully they'll start within the next 6 weeks and be at future meetings. I think the only other 2 were NOFOs for the SMART discretionary grant program, the Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation. That one is, the deadline is coming up at November 18th. And so if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out to him or us. And then the other would be the ATTAIN program. This one's a mouthful, Advanced Transportation Technologies and Innovative Mobility Development, or Technologies and Innovation Program. And so this is also focused on ITS improvements, the discretionary grant program as well, that is due November 18th as well. And I think that there is one more that he wanted to relay, which is the USDOT's Thriving Communities Program. And that one, I think the letter of interest is due December 6th. And so if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out.
I do know on the SMART program, the close of technical questions is actually this Friday.
Okay.
That have been submitted to?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I guess my question was on the SMART. I've just, amongst peers here, how many people are looking at going for SMART or ATTAIN? Y'all are?
We're looking at SMART.
Yeah.
It was kind of tight for us, but we're looking at it.
Yeah.
That's the one that's two phases. SMART's two phases, and you don't have to be two, it's really weird. You don't have to be two phases, but it's set up to be that way.
Yeah, I won't lie, I say on the latest rounds of new pots of funding that have come through Federal Highway, whether it be the Safe Streets for All, this SMART, it's new, and it's got some new criteria to it. It's a little bit more of a challenge, I think, to wrap your mind around how it's supposed to go. And we're trying to go through the SMART grant application ourselves and just trying to figure out what is a sample type of project you can go for. I mean, you go to what level and to what detail you go for. So it's a bit of a challenge, but we'll be a guinea pig with Franklin. So
It would have been nice to have had the criteria much earlier.
I know. So
For this amount of money.
Jonathan, I'll let you know how it goes. So anyway, that's the only comments I have on that part.
The matrix that you have related to some of the state funding opportunities, we've also been working on a discretionary funding matrix that identifies a lot of these grants that are coming out associated with the IIJA. And so we're having trouble even keeping them straight between ourselves. And so I think this matrix will be helpful. We can probably just send it around in the follow-up email so that you can have access to that. I think like most programs, they're still new, and so there's not really many projects to point towards that give you a concrete example of successful grants. But at the very least, you'll have access to who's eligible to apply and the types of funding amounts that are available in the cycle. So we'll share that with you as well.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. On behalf of Sean, any other questions? All right, move right along. TDOT, Jonathan,
Yes.
Robert, either one of you.
Just really quick, if you have an agenda packet, it says agenda item 5. Some of you may be aware of this, some of you may be not. TDOT has recently, in the last year, switched to something called EPD, Expedited Project Delivery. And what EPD is attempting to do is eliminate the weight that you have of projects moving forward. So you might have a project that was funded for PE 2 years ago. You've been waiting 5 years for it to be funded for right away. You might wait 7 years for it to be funded for construction. So what TDOT has switched to is the EPD process, in which TDOT has lists of committed and non-committed projects. And there is a website that you can go to. The link is in your agenda. Also, I'm sure Sean will send it out. This MPO currently has 61 projects that are TDOT-sponsored projects. Of those 61, 14 of them have become what we call committed projects into the EPD cycle. 47 of those are obviously not committed. With the EPD process, once TDOT has committed to your project, the commitment is it will get to construction within 5 years. So if your project is ready for P, if TDOT accepts that project, commits to it, it will go from PE to right away to construction within 5 years. Now, part of the new process is ranking those non-committed projects to see which one TDOT should move forward. This is a large change for the department. I know, Anna, you saw a presentation in Clarksville a couple of weeks ago. TDOT is going to present that to the policy board in 2 weeks, the 16th. But I wanted you all to know about this. If you hear about it, it's just a complete shift in the way TDOT operates. So in the short short term, you might log on to the site and see a committed project that's currently ready for right of way. Or you might see a committed project that's currently ready for construction. It might not take the full 5 years for that project that's in construction to get to construction. It might not take 5 years for something that's ready for right of way to get to construction. The whole point of the 5-year timeframe is if we take a project from ready for PE to ready for construction within 5 years. So, sure you have questions. Sorry that you couldn't provide box lunches for us today. So I'm happy to field questions, or you can email me or talk to me afterward if you have any additional questions.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
Yes.
Any other comments, questions? All right, next is Chair's report. In the essence of time, I'm gonna pass the balance of my report, and I'll pass it to the staff. Sean?
I'll just give a quick update on the project delivery. I know it's been a while since our last meeting, but we are gonna reconvene for our 6th meeting in December. I think the Thursday, December 8th is the date that we're targeting. And that will focus on, this, integrated project delivery, from TDOT that is focused more so on the state projects, but I think has a lot of, benefit in changing of the approach to project delivery that may, eventually benefit the local programs process that you guys are more familiar with. And I think, we're also gonna be, continuing to work through some of those, action items that we can take in the short, medium, and long term to, improve the existing process, across a number of those areas of, opportunity that we've highlighted in the past. I also wanted to introduce, one of GNRC's new staff members, Jeremy Sanford, who's, sitting in the back there. He, recently graduated from the University of Buffalo's, graduate planning program, and, we are very lucky to have him. I know everyone is struggling to find good people these days, and so, we're fortunate that he, joined us and, has been with us for less than a month, I think. So he's still learning, but, the region, but, he is, really enjoys the, beautiful scenery of Tennessee, and so we're sending him around all across the GNRC regions.
All right, thanks, Sean. Any, comments, questions?
Maybe I have one thing.
Sure.
I'm gonna introduce, if it's all right, Sutter County has a newly elected road superintendent, Ellis, back there. We're glad to have him here with us, he's taking an active interest in everything that we're doing here.
Good.
So we're happy about that. It's good to have the road superintendent. Tom and I talk about that a lot. It's good to have those guys involved in this process, I think. So thanks to Toby for coming.
Yeah, I'm glad for all the new faces. Any other may have missed? So, all right, seeing any other business before we adjourn? All right, thank you. Seeing no other, we are adjourned.
All right. Make them up there.
I didn't ask my motion.
But you heard me.
You motion,
Kinda weird.
motion that we adjourn.
Yeah.